By 1942, RKO was in trouble. A series of big gambles, among them Citizen Kane, hadn't paid off. And now the studio was deep in debt and badly in need of cash. Charles Tourneur, the new production chief, had an idea. Universal was quickly establishing itself as Hollywood's house of horror. Why couldn't RKO get in on that action? The idea was simple. Make cheap, short horror films with inexpensive stars, using sets already available on the RKO lot, and turn enough of a profit to bring the foundering studio back from the brink of death. To run the new division, Tourneur tapped Val Lewton, an MGM producer who had been working with David O. Selznick. Executives would hand Lewton a market-tested title, and then he would create a story around it. His first assignment? Cat People. Lewton knew the studio expected a low-budget imitation of the Universal monster movies, but he was determined to do something different. He met with director Jacques Tourneur and screenwriter DeWitt Bodine. The three of them created the story for the film, and then Bodine and Lewton wrote the screenplay. Cat People tells the story of Irena Dubrovna, a Serbian woman living in New York City. She meets and falls in love with Oliver Reed, an American engineer. But Irena is tormented by the folklore of her homeland. Specifically, she's afraid that if she gives in to strong emotions, anger, jealousy, most of all, sexual passion, she'll transform into a wildcat and start murdering people. Oliver is sure that, in time, he can free her from her obsession with what he calls old fairy tales.
Fairy tales hurt in your childhood. Nothing more than that.
So they get married. But things don't get better, and after a time, Irena's celibacy starts to be an issue. Oliver turns to his friend Alice for comfort. Irena becomes jealous and starts stalking them. Gradually, Oliver and Alice begin to suspect that those old fairy tales about the cat people might actually be true. The movie was a big hit, and Lewton's new division was off and running. But since then, Cat People has kind of fallen into obscurity. When it comes up in film conversations at all, it's usually in reference to this sequence here, which is often considered the earliest example of the quiet, bwah jump scare. I can't really blame people. I mean, the plot summary I just gave you sounds like typical mid-century American horror, where good old-fashioned American values take on the dark and sinister foreigner.
What is the matter, Alice?
Irena is just not normal. I mean, she won't abandon her old-world values and assimilate into American culture. She won't put out. And that accent.
You're the first friend I met in America.
But in fact, Cat People flips this paradigm on its head. Irena isn't the villain here. If anything, she's the film's most complex and sympathetic character, caught between warring impulses, desperate for close, real connection, but terrified of what might happen if she reaches out. True, she's a bit unusual. I mean, she's soothed by the sounds of the lions roaring from the zoo. She likes to sit in her apartment in the dark.
I like the dark. It's friendly.
But she's not portrayed as dangerous, except to those who do her wrong. In contrast to Simone's engaging and three-dimensional portrayal, we have Irena's husband, Oliver. No offense at all to Kent Smith and his performance here, but Oliver is a wet piece of cardboard. And that's intentional. He has no depth, and he lacks all capacity for self-reflection. While commiserating with Alice at the office water cooler, Oliver says that his difficulties with Irena are the first time in his life he's felt any unhappiness.
I've never been unhappy before.
He's pretty much just skated along from one pleasant experience to the next, doing what society tells him to and never asking why. He doesn't have any internal reasons for what he does, or for what he thinks. He assumes that his own perspective is the right one, and anyone who sees things differently is just patently wrong. This lack of empathy leaves him unable to understand Irena or to even try.
You're talking like an insane.
Their first meeting, she tells him the legend of the cat people who lived in the woods around her village and how the medieval King John drove them into hiding when he reclaimed the region for Christianity. The next time they see each other, he's brought her a pet. Because, you know, the point of her story was that she really likes cats, you dumb potato. Oliver carries this same cluelessness into their marriage. He's dismissive of her fears as irrational, and her cultural traditions as childish and inferior to American ones.
Oh, Irena, you crazy kid.
When Irena doesn't simply exchange her worldview for his overnight, he responds as if she's just being stubborn and won't accept reality. For some reason, things don't improve after Oliver spends zero time trying to understand his wife, so after a few weeks, he sends her to a psychiatrist. You know, the same way you would send a car with a bad transmission to a mechanic. Say, doctor, my wife seems to be broken. Can you have her fixed in time for our bridge club at 8:30? You could read Oliver as a parody of the mid-century American male. His middle-class values and paternalistic attitude towards acquaintances both foreign and female seem to foreshadow the father-knows-best suburban culture of the nifty 50s.
You're so normal, you're even in love with me, Oliver Reed, a good plain Americano.
I'm not willing to declare unequivocally that this is the point of his character, but given that his creators were a French director, a Russian-American producer, and a gay playwright, I don't think it's a stretch to see Oliver Reed as a critique of the dominant American culture of the time.
How about some apple pie and a cup of coffee?
Also, the guy eats a lot of apple pie and coffee.
And you get the apple pie.
There are really only two other characters in the film. Alice Moore, a nothing part that is nevertheless played quite well by Jane Randolph, and Dr. Lewis Judd, played by Tom Conway.
What does one tell a husband? One tells him nothing.
Judd is one of the most irritating sacks of rhinoceros potato ever to grace the screen. He's smug and condescending, and only gets more so when he's talking to women.
What a clever girl. All the psychologists have tried for years to find that subtle difference between mind and soul. And you found it.
He's so devoted to his narrow view of the world that he won't even consider other possibilities even when they're pushed right in his stupid British face. You could argue that it's this rigidity that leads to his downfall. He ignores all of the warnings he's been given and just plows ahead, sure that he knows best. But I don't want to make him sound like a tragic figure. Judd is a sexual predator who preys on his female patients.
The way he goes around kissing hands makes me want to spit cotton.
Using his position of authority to pressure them.
At this moment, I could go before a board and have you put away for observation.
And delighting in his ability, through hypnosis, to access their innermost private lives.
You told me many things.
His death comes right after he tries to force himself on Irena, too, so I won't even pretend I wasn't ecstatic watching him get mauled. Also, how the hell did they get a shot of him clearly ogling Irena's ass past the censors? I think that Cat People, at its root, is the story of an outsider who longs to be accepted for who she is. At first, she's severely repressed.
I want to be Mrs. Reed, really. And I can't.
She's afraid of the parts of herself that she's tried to deny. She flees to America, but everyone there, her husband, her doctor, insists that she needs to throw all of herself away, not just the darkness. Be rational. Submit to your husband. Assimilate. Repress. And for a long time, she tries to do that. But it's only when she embraces those buried parts of herself that she comes truly alive. Confident, beautiful, powerful. And yet, if that's the message here, what are we supposed to make of the closing epigraph taken from the holy sonnets of English poet John Donne? But black sin hath betrayed to endless night my world, both parts, and both parts must die. At first glance, this seems a thunderous indictment of Irena for giving in to her urges. She's allowed the cat part to take over, and in the end, dies for it. but that reading doesn't seem in keeping with the perspective of the rest of the film. I think there's another character caught between two worlds here, a character who, as the epigraph would suggest, ultimately loses everything. Going back to the scene at the water cooler, Oliver tries to explain to Alice why he's so conflicted about Irena. He doesn't feel the kind of love for his wife that Alice professes to have for him, but he is nevertheless drawn to her. But he can't reconcile his rational, modern view of the world with his love for this strange, irrational woman. As the film approaches its climax, Oliver's resistance to Irena's stories and his belief in the modern world of logic starts to crumble. A panther corners him and Alice at the office, but then, instinctively, he addresses the animal as Irena. As the square casts a cruciform shadow on the wall, Oliver invokes the name of God, and the panther flees. In the closing moments of the film, Oliver looks down at Irena's lifeless body. "She never lied to us," he says to Alice. A final, irrevocable admission that the story of the cat people was no fairy tale after all. In fact, his own version of the world, logical, materialistic, might be the real fable. With his life's roadmap no longer reliable and his wife dead, what does he have left? Far from the schlocky B-movie horror that RKO executives expected, Val Lewton's Cat People is a complex, moving, and unsettling thriller. By flipping the expected creature feature model on its head, the film raises a number of questions about gender politics, about American exceptionalism, about the nature of good and evil, that are, if anything, even more relevant nearly 80 years later. And yeah, okay, the first jump scare. Hey film dorks, how's it going? Hope you enjoyed my review of Cat People. If you've never seen the film before, I hope this video piqued your interest. If you have seen it before, let me know down there your thoughts on the movie itself, on my analysis, or comment your favorite hidden gem movie that you think doesn't get enough love. Stay tuned for one more review coming out the end of November. In December, look for my best, worst, and weirdest of the year lists. If you enjoy the work that I do, I hope you'll consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you as always for watching. I hope you're all staying safe, happy, and well, and I will see you on the flip side.
What happened tonight happens in every family.
Wanna bet?